the talk, Reviving Germantown Yarns in the 21st Century with Kelbourne Woolens. Since we were founded in 1824, we have collected and preserved an astonishing array of documents that bring the people of the past into conversation with us today. We enter our 3rd century, eager to invite you to find yourself in history, and I know several of you were already here doing research this morning. Come on in, come on in. To connect with the past and make meaningful discoveries about who you are and who we are together. We're delighted that you're joining us for this endeavor to explore our shared American history. We'd especially like to thank this evening our sponsors, the Young Friends of HSP. They have provided the funds for the raffle prize. I hope you have all bought your raffle tickets. It is 12 skeins of Germantown bulky so that you can knit the pattern we will be debuting this evening. We are on hybrid, we are on Zoom, and so this will be recorded. We're very happy to have all of you at home on Zoom with us. There is closed captioning. Please click the CC button. We will follow this recording tonight's, sorry, I'm getting all mixed up. We will be recording tonight's program and it will be sent to everyone, all of you and all of you at home in a follow-up email so that you can review it again. We will have time for questions at the end, and our virtual audience can participate in the questions by using the chat throughout the program as you think of your questions, and we will have people ready to answer your questions. We also, it's a little warm in here. We have fans for you to use, so please help yourselves. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce Courtney, Kelley, and Kate Gagnon Osborn. They are Kelbourne Woolens, which was founded in 2008. Together, Together, they founded Kelbourne Woolens at Kate's kitchen table and have been working side by side ever since. They operated in the beginning as a sole distribution company, working closely with other brands to make their products great. Kelbourne Woolens had success with their pattern line, but were always designing in someone else's yarn. That changed in 2017 when they poured their years of experience into their own line of Kelbourne Woolens branded yarns, including the Germantown yarn that we'll be discussing tonight. So, thank you so much for being here. Courtney, would you like to take it away?
Yeah. So I'm Courtney. I'm one half of Kelbourne Woolens. I'm the eager public speaker half. And so when Tara brought this idea to do this presentation all about the history of Germantown, I was very excited to work with the Historical Society. So I want to thank them for having us and letting us get into all of their records, which are extensive and very fun. So Germantown is what we're going to talk about today. It's yarn. It's a worsted weight yarn. It's very classic. It's very basic. It's produced currently in North Carolina. We'll talk about that in a bit. And it was really important to us that it be produced at least in the US. There's no yarn manufacturing really that happens in Pennsylvania anymore, in Philadelphia in particular. But North Carolina still has a pretty vibrant textile manufacturing industry. And so that's where it's made. We started making it in 2018, which was conveniently our 10-year anniversary as a company. And we introduced Kelbourne Woolens' line of yarns with 4 yarns, one each season. Germantown was the fall yarn. Very appropriate. It's great for back to school. But Germantown was not a yarn that we came up with. It's been around for kind of as long as people have been producing wool yarn in North America, in this, continent, in the colonies. It's like Kleenex, right? So everybody kind of makes it. It's just good wool yarn. And so for many years, Germantown, and you'll see in some of these books that are around, if you have a chance to walk around and look, there's a number of different companies that made Germantown, a number of different patterns that called for Germantown, and everyone at the time just knew what that meant. It didn't even have to be yarn that had a brand or a label. It just meant worsted weight, combed, spun, good quality wool. So how did it start? In Germantown, in Philadelphia. Germantown began as its own little town. It was chartered by William Penn for Pastorius and a bunch of other German families who came over from Krefeld, Germany. This is a very lovely picture of Germantown. And I feel like some of these buildings are there today. Like, is that Wick? I thought, yeah. Yeah. Germantown is fascinating. But so, hang on one second. This is in my way. Penn wanted them to settle in sort of what is now Roxborough and East Falls, but the land wasn't really good for farming. They wanted to move up the hill. And so they were granted the land that is now Germantown. And these families were Mennonites, they were Quakers, and they came from doing linen manufacturing in Germany. Right there, kind of in the middle. So they founded a linen industry in Pennsylvania, and they became known for producing some of the finest linen textiles in the early early colonies. I'm not a history major except for yarn, so, you know, the timeline is a little funny. But it was a cottage industry, right? The Industrial Revolution had not happened. People were just, they were making yarn. They were selling yarn. Germantown became synonymous with yarn. That's where the name comes from. Mills start popping up. The cottage industry, this happens, all over the world, right? All over the Western world, cottage industry is taking off. People are trading, communities are growing, people start to build mills, right? So there's industry now. They're moving out of this cottage industry into a bunch of different mills all along the Schuylkill. There's a great map over there if you have a chance that shows all the different mills along the Schuylkill River. There were mills in North Philly, in Germantown. This is an image of Joseph Fling's Germantown Yarn Mill. And here's this is from Philogeo History, the Hexamer report, I think it is. The Germantown Yarn Mill was at Worcester and Wingohocking, which is a place you could still visit today, although the mill is no longer there. And then this is what's called the Old Mill that was run by Horstman, who we're going to talk about in just a moment. So Horstman was an industrialist here in Philadelphia, and he was at this time producing yarn, producing silks, producing cottons, braids, military, pom-poms, ribbons, braiding, and he made, guess what, a ton of money during the Civil War. He had all the military contracts, not all of them, but he had a lot of the military contracts for producing the uniforms which were woven with wool, which was spun in Germantown. This is his location of his mill that was at the corner of Germantown Ave and what is now Cecil B. Moore. It is no longer there. There is this there now. But this mill is what we used as inspiration for the logo on our Germantown ball bands. So it lives on. There were a bunch of companies in Philadelphia, in Boston, all, everywhere, producing yarn with the name Germantown. Again, because it just meant this is the wool. But then you could go into Wanamaker's, or you could go into a shop eventually and buy Columbia Germantown, Fleischer's Germantown, Minerva, Germantown. There was Lion Brand in New York, which is still around today, produced a Germantown. So if you lived in New York, you would go to the department store and you would buy Lion Brand's Germantown. This is a great image of the Horstman exhibit from the Pennsylvania World's Fair in 1876. And you can see there all of the ribbons and everything on the cards. And you can see those in person over here, which I think is just fantastic. They're really beautiful, dyed silks and all kinds of stuff. So we're getting into the later part of the 1800s, and he's got a new mill at 5th and Cherry Street. And he is the manufacturer of dress trimmings and military goods. And he is the founder of the Columbia brand of yarn, many of which you guys are probably familiar with Columbia, which then later became Columbia Minerva. And his mill was located there where the US Mint is now. So it was right downtown, and it took up like a whole city block. It was huge. I hear that war contracts are quite lucrative. So I think that might have had something to do with it. But Germantown, as a military, they're providing yarn for the military. During this time, we have westward expansion. And there are a lot of people in the western part of the country that are being forcibly moved from their lands, their traditional lands, where they had been raising their own sheep to do their own weavings. There's a number of different ways that people tried to continue supplying the weavers, the native weavers, with wool. One of the ways was by providing them Germantown yarn. They would load it up on trains and cart it out west, and then people would weave with it. It's not a great part of our history, but it is part of the story of both the yarn and Navajo weaving. There is a ton of resources about this story out there. I'm not an expert on this, so I will just say that it is a thing. And the weavings, in many ways, I think the yarns were sent because they were probably surplus, but they were dyed very vibrant colors, which would have been new and kind of revolutionary. And the weaving, the textile artists did incredible things with them. The blankets that were produced during this very specific period of time are highly valuable and stunningly beautiful. Here's another earlier example. The dyes were aniline dyes, so they were chemically dyed, so they had these brighter colors, whereas before everything would have been natural dyes. So a little bit more muted, they could really, make these really stunning images. And then we are in the industrial age fully. No longer manufactured exclusively in Germantown. Obviously, mills were all around the city. There were mills in Southwest Philly, North Philly, all over the place. Philadelphia and the surrounding area was a huge textile manufacturing area. It's why we have the Pennsylvania College of Textiles and Science, which I will always call textile, which is now part of Jefferson University, formerly Philadelphia University. So we have Fleischer Yarns, also located in Philadelphia. They are also producing beautiful Germantown yarn, a bunch of other yarns as well. This is an awesome ad from the early part of the 20th century from the Fleischer Yarn Company. It is the same family, yeah. as the Fleischer Memorial Art Center. Yeah. This is a great Germantown ad. It's really cool to see the yarn put up in a hank like that, like a twisted hank, the way we would buy it today in a shop. But instead of being a yarn shop that gets bags of yarn, your yarn would come in a box, which I don't know, for some reason, I just think is like so beautiful. I wish I had one of those boxes. This is a Fleischer color card from 1929. I have yet to get my hands on a real color card from any period. I desperately want one if anybody has one. But we actually used this to come up with the initial palette of our Germantown yarn. So we took this and we kind of were like, okay, well, let's try and stay within this kind of color family here to really be true to what it was. And I think we did a pretty good job. Yeah. So World War II happens. Things start to change really fast. New materials like Orlon start to pop up places, and people are understandably like, this is amazing. Why would I knit with wool? I can wash this. It's very easy to take care of. I don't have to worry about moths or carpet beetles. I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. This is going to last forever. And people just, people wanted convenience. By the 1960s, acrylic yarns were being manufactured and sold, and just as time progressed, became more and more popular. The 1990s kind of saw the end of Germantown as it was produced here in the US. The mills were closing, stuff was moving overseas. Acrylic yarn was still is today, super strong. People love that stuff. It's got a place, but wool is really great. From our research, I think it was Brunswick who produced the last Germantown yarn in the US. And I think they closed in 1994. And this is what it looks like today. And that's Kate's drawing of the old mill, the old Horstman Columbia Germantown mill. And we were able to find the expired trademark, and we purchased it in 2017. The last people to own the Germantown trademark was Coates and Clark, who make Red Heart. So they let it expire. So and now we have it. It is made now as I think it probably was way back when, and not so way back when in the 90s, with a wool called territory wool or territorial wool, which just means this is a bunch of wool from a bunch of different sheep who live west. It's mostly Columbia, Targhee, Polypay, and Rambouillet. But it's just a blend. It has a specific kind of micron count, which is the number of scales kind of along a strand. The scalier it is, the scratchier it is, the smoother it is, the softer it is. Somewhere nicely in the middle. I took an old skein of Brunswick, Germantown down to the mill in like 2015, 2016, and was like, do you think you could make this? And the guy from the mill takes it and he's holding it. He's kind of looking at it. He's British guy. Yes, it's quite raspy. And I was like, well, yeah, it's like a 30-year-old skein of yarn. It's not great. And he was like, I think we could do better. I was like, okay, show me what you got. But I remember knitting with Germantown as a kid. It's like what I learned to knit on. And I always felt like it felt different. It wasn't so soft, but I think that's actually good. Germantown, as it is today, with the territory wool, has a ton of bounce. It's got like a nice crimpy bounce to it. It's really pleasant to knit with, and it feels like what I want yarn to feel like. These were the very first skeins that arrived at our mill. We were very happy to receive them. The mill is in North Carolina. It's in Ranlow, near Charlotte. Yeah, it's like an hour northwest-ish of Charlotte, North Carolina. There's nothing else. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's two mills. There's a dye house and a spinning mill. They're not in the same location, but they are the same entity. And one of the things that was really important to us, like we make a lot of yarns. We work with a ton of mills all over the world. When you do American manufacturing now, it's very, very difficult because everyone has sold off parts of their operation. They've sold off the dye house, or they've sold off the reeling machines, or they've sold off the sorting room, so everyone can specialize in one thing. So you can buy your wool in Idaho or Wyoming, and then you can have it shipped to like California and get it scoured. And then you can get it shipped to Connecticut and get it like spun, or then you can ship it to somewhere in Pennsylvania to get it dyed. But then you have to ship it to somebody else to skein it off of the cone. And so by the time all is said and done, you don't have a viable product. Nobody's going to pay for that because it's just wool yarn. Like, it's not special. So why would, it would be like a $50 skein of yarn. It's ridiculous. So the reason we chose this mill was they were like, no, we can do the whole thing for you. We can get the wool, we can dye it, we can spin it, we can skein it, we can tag it, and we can bag it and box it and put it on a truck to you. And I was like, you have a deal. Let's do it. And they were like, here's our minimums. We were like, please buy Germantown yarn. It's very important. But if nothing else, we are incredibly proud that we had this idea, like people who are completely bananas, and we're like, no, we can do this. And we did. And we're doing it here in Philadelphia, which just feels kind of unreal. So it's great. And we want to talk about patterns as well, because I feel like it wouldn't be fair to talk about a yarn company without talking about pattern support, because I feel like it is fully 50% of what we do. Every yarn company makes patterns. You have to show people what to do with your yarn. People want to know. I mean, there's like a million patterns that you can find on the internet now. It was not always that way. And we still have like shops and people say, what do I do with this? And I go, it's a DK weight cotton. Knit something. I don't know. But we do publish patterns for all of our yarn, and they are lovely. And they have always been lovely. So the knitting books have really not changed. You would walk into a department store and you would look at all of the yarns, and then you would look at all the pattern books and you'd be like, I'm going to make that. And maybe you would be like, I've never knit before, but don't worry, because every book has knitting instructions printed in the front of it. And there's this great I think one of these books is here on that table. And if you flip to the front, you can see this is like your knit check is this picture of the needles and hooks. So you can be like, and that looks like that one. I'll call that a 10. That's fine. This is a Columbia knitting book from 1908. And it's like 150 pages long of patterns. It's amazing. And there's tons of these. This one, I'm going to go on a very brief tangent, but there was a woman active in Philadelphia named Anna Schumacher from like 1907 to 1916, 18, who is credited with all of these pattern books. And then she like disappears. But all of these books use the same patterns kind of over and over and over again. They're like, Anna, it's 1912, we need a new book. And she's like, these patterns are still fine. Here's another one. So I'm not sure if she was like an editor of the books. I don't know how the patterns like came about, but they do all kind of have a very similar vibe. This is a Columbia Book of Yarns from 1915. And I love this. This is the first page. The manufacturers of Columbia Yarn present with pleasure this latest edition of the Columbia Book of Yarns. Everybody knits nowadays. Which I've been working in this industry for like 25, 30 years. And anytime somebody walks into the shop or on a trade show or whatever, they're like, so many people are knitting now. Have you noticed? Like everyone is knitting all of a sudden. And I'm like, I know. It was also true in 1997. This is just some fantastic sweaters that I pulled out that I just thought were really fun. I particularly love the ladies' crocheted petticoat. There's many knit and crocheted patterns for petticoats, which I desperately want to make. Have not done. There's also, I had to put in the Navajo blanket in air quotes. There's a lot of these, both knit and crocheted, that kind of mimic these woven blankets. They were very popular. Right? I don't deal with the pattern side of our company so much. I lack a specific attention to detail that is required for writing good knitting patterns. But I'm a very good knitter. So you just like, I would just make it. Like, you just look at it. It's like, yeah, but I know how my body is shaped. I'll just make a cardigan. It's fine. But if you're designing for a company and you're publishing a pattern, somebody else needs to know actually what to do. There's no vagaries can be involved, which is why having Kate as my business partner is so important. So she's going to explain how math works.
And if you want to come up with me and we can kind of do this together, not as enthusiastic of a public speaker, so I'll do my best. I don't even know how. Can I turn it off and just whisper?
No, because the people on Zoom
They'll be
can't
so
hear
mad, okay.
you.
So part of this journey that we're on together in celebrating the anniversary and obviously being really excited and enthusiastic about the history of the yarn. One of the things that Courtney didn't mention, one of those photos, I think it's my hand with the sort of jade green skein. For whatever reason, she wasn't in the office that day and I sent her that photo and she sobbed. So I think it's important to mention just the meaning behind it, bringing back this history and also really supporting as much as we can and acknowledging the history of the textiles in Philly. So I think you were a little too humble about that. You're rolling that. But so, and, you know, working with the Historical Society and celebrating the history of Philadelphia because textiles are such an important integral part of that. when you came to the shop and brought the pattern. I was like, oh yeah, we have these all, we have piles of these. They're so fun. But it came in one size. I didn't have a gauge. And it didn't really, like, the instructions are literally like, well, this is what it looks like. You can see, so you should knit it. So one of the things for updating patterns for today, you have to do math. I find the math part to be really fun. I find it to be really interesting, because you can really do a lot. You can really figure it out. So as Tara said, you guys will get this slide, but there are ways to update these vintage patterns for today. All you need to know is your gauge and the size you want to make, and you can figure it out. And it's really fun. And that's what we did for this. We called it the whole time at work, the dressing sacque, which is not what it's called, but as a joke, we were like, what is this word? I put it on Ravelry and I was like, there's no sacque category. Like it's a cardigan on Ravelry. But the original pattern was in the collection. Do you want to expand
Sure.
upon that a
Yeah.
little bit?
So I was looking through our Wanamaker collection, surveying for a digitization project, and I came across the catalog, which is the first item on this back table here. And if you want to see more of it, please ask for some help with that one. It's particularly fragile, but I fell in love with this pattern. And I thought, I know that I don't understand anything of the directions here, but I can knit that. And it called for Germantown Yarn. And I had read an article that Courtney had written in Piecework. Are you all familiar with the Piecework magazine? Yes. Which we then collected. And I thought, hey, presto, I can put these two together. And that's when I came to visit you and said, can you help me make this? And do you want to come talk about it at HSP? And so that's how we got here.
So as part of the celebration, we have updated the pattern. So took the original pattern. I did my best to extrapolate what we thought they wanted the gauge to be, because it was not included in the pattern. And then also it was expanded, so it's written for multiple sizes. And then it does, the way that it's knit, you cast on at the back, and then you knit the back, and then you cast on the sleeves back and forth, and then you do some binding off, and then you do the sleeve, or you do the sleeves, then you bind off, and then you do the front. So I really wanted the sleeves to fit depending on the sizing. So there's some short row shaping, and then yarn requirements, a schematic, which no one did that. That was like not even a thing to be considered. So we have the free pattern for you guys. So one of the other thing that's really fun, I forgot to mention, is that I think it was 50 years for the copyright, like the trademark on these. It's like, I mean, there's like kind of a long time. We were saying in the car on the way here that the 80s were only 20 years ago. So, some of these patterns, they're so old. This one I think is from 1918. So that's only like 30 years ago. So that one, if they're in the public archive, they're sort of free use. But so that's why we've made it free for you all to knit.
The pattern is free. If you take a photo of this slide, you can go to the Kelbourne Woolens Ravelry page, and you can download it for free there. You can also visit their website and download the pattern for free and purchase the yarn all in once. And we also have printed out some hard copies for those of you who are like, I need paper. I don't want to do this digitally. So we have those here to give out to you. And it is an absolutely beautifully designed pattern with lots of extra information for it. With tutorials in it, links in the PDF pattern, and we're very excited about it. We have two that are knitted over there. I would be wearing my gray one, but it is so warm. Really warm. You'll love it in the fall, but right now it's very warm.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. Come on up.
Okay. Thank you, Courtney.
Should we answer questions?
Yes, we're going to do Q&A.
That was-
Okay, so here's the deal with Q&A. We do need everyone to speak into a mic so that people at home can hear your questions. So raise your hands and you hang on to that one and I'll with this one. So we
And then
have our
can't
first
forget
question.
Our friends at home too.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. You're giving us the questions from home, Selena? Great, thank you. Okay.
So you mentioned looking for the color cards for the old Germantown yarns. Have you checked with the Science History Institute? Because they have a lot of information about aniline dyeing in the Philly area, and they might have old stuff related.
No. No.
Yeah, I just went to it. It was amazing.
Thank you very much. We have not, and we will now.
Thank you.
I have heard, but I have not researched further that the Fleischer Art Memorial might have an ephemera collection where it may be, but I have not gotten there yet. But that's a good tip.
Hi, other than its locality, what specifically about the Germantown Yarn made you want to revive it?
Oh.
Hmm.
It's just yarn. Yeah, because it's just yarn, because it was just, I just wanted good, classic workhorse yarn. We had spent a long time, kind of like working with other yarn companies to like build their business and develop their lines, and a lot of like high end, very luxury, very expensive, very fine fiber silks and cashmeres and all of that. And I think after doing that for so long, when we wanted to design our own line of yarns, I mean, we were like, at that time, you know, we both had young kids. We were like in our 30s. We were like, this isn't the yarn I want to knit with. Like, I just want to knit with yarn, like good yarn. And I just kept thinking about Germantown. And I think living in Philly, like you kind of can't get away from it in a way, like that history. And I think in the early 2000s, there were a lot of companies who were trying to do US manufacturing, like Brooklyn Tweed and Quince, and who were like very successful at it. But knowing what we knew about their supply chain and knowing what we knew about like bigger yarn companies' supply chains, we knew what we did not want to do. Yeah, keep it simple. That's
Okay,
like-
we have some questions online.
Yeah.
Thank you. So first a comment, someone said, thanks so much. We have folks joining from the Philadelphia Guild of Hand Weavers, Guild House
guys.
online. And then a couple of questions from the Zoom. So the first is, what is the meaning of worsted?
So worsted has two meanings, just to make it super confusing. So worsted is a weight, but it's also a way the yarn is spun. So in regards to the weight, yarn is identified, there's fingering, sport, DK. Fingering is also sometimes called 4-ply, but it can be made out of all different number of plies. And then, so sport, DK, worsted, Aran, et cetera, et cetera. So worsted is sort of right in the middle when you're talking about weight. And then when you're talking about it in terms of the manufacturing process, there's a woolen spun and a worsted spun, which are the two traditional ways of spinning. A worsted spun, the fibers, when they're blended, they're combed in a straight line so that they are all aligned and they are all parallel to one another. And then it can be spun and then plied. There can be single ply worsted, and in the case of Germantown, it's a 4-ply. So Germantown is a double worsted because it's a worsted weight yarn that is manufactured in the worsted method.
Couple more questions in the chat. A good genealogy one. If our ancestors were involved in the wool industry, what might some of the jobs be called?
So I'm from Massachusetts, from New England. So we similarly here in Philadelphia, there were a lot of textile mills up there, which now no longer exists and are like cool art lofts or abandoned. And I had some ancestors in the industry. So you could do anything starting from, you could run the carder, you could run the spinner, you could run the plier, you could run the baler, the reeler. Yeah, so, all of those jobs do exist today. All of the mill in North Carolina, we were there a few months ago. They do all of those jobs still to this day. The manufacturing has changed very little in that time. They're just not children anymore. They're like adults.
That's good.
Like health insurance and a living wage. School.
We have a few more questions online, but is there anyone in the room who has a question? Okay, I'll be right there.
I don't know if I can talk at all. Are there any machine knitters here?
No, come on, guys. It's so fast.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope it's coming back.
It's
It is a little bit.
Yeah, so I went to whatever it's called now, the school, call it,
Textile.
yeah, I went to textile. So there's a brand of machine called PassApp that is no longer manufactured anymore. They don't exist anymore. So they're hard to come by, but yeah.
But we work with another company called Navia, who's based in the Faroe Islands. And they're very excited because they just got a new machine called a Shima. Do you know about the Shima? It's a whole garment knitting machine. Yeah. Yeah, they're very excited about it. And every time we have a meeting with them, they tell us about it. They're cool.
Or for personal manufacturing?
Yeah, so that's. Yeah, part of the problem with the machine, you know, when you think about like we have the small looms, the table looms, and then you have the CompuDobbies, you know, the multiple hardness computer looms, the same sort of issues, complications, pricing happens with the knitting machines is that when you're getting into something like a Shima Shaky whole garment construction, you need a room and then you also need $30,000. So, or that's how much they were when I was in grad school 15 years ago. So it's just, it doesn't really.
The only reason I know all these people, I'm so jealous with them all hand knitting, which I also do.
Mhm.
But I know most hand knitters think of us machine knitters as doing something terrible.
No,
But-
you guys, none of you think that, right?
But
No,
you-
see, it's fine.
There's so much like Susan Gualiumi's hand
Yeah,
manipulated stitches, you could go and just spend hours.
yeah.
And-
Yeah, one of our colleagues is a professor at textile and she combines the two. She'll do a lot of stockinette on the machine and then do the fun part by hand. So.
So I noticed that the mill that you used for the ball band was located in Central City, right? Or Century.
Kelley.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. But there was a mill that was located like,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the Horseman one.
Oh, right. Okay. So I wondered, like, does that reflect a change in the source of energy they were using because it wasn't by the river anymore?
Good question.
Yeah, why was it in the city? Like downtown?
Nick? What? Coal? Coal, that's why? Yeah, because of coal. Yeah, you didn't need the water to power it anymore. I guess those early mills were all along the Wingahocken Creek, which is now underground, or along the Schuylkill River. But yeah, then I guess with coal, you didn't need to do that.
We have another question from online.
Yeah.
Let me read it. Is your yarn only used for knitting?
No, you can do, you can,
Could you tell us what we could use it for?
you can crochet with it. You can weave with it. You can embroider with it. You can make pom-poms with it. You can do anything you can do with yarn, you can do with our yarn.
Was there another question?
Are you selling it only at your location or are you selling it through distributors? I must have missed that.
Oh, no,
somewhere.
I don't think we specifically said. So we are, we started as wholesale distributors, and that is kind of still the bread and butter of what we do. But then we also do have a little shop in Mount Airy that's attached to our warehouse. We have a little retail shop, and then we also sell online.
Just to give a shout out, we sell all of our yarns, including Germantown, I think to every local yarn store in the greater Philadelphia area. So if Loop is your yarn shop, or Wild Hand is your yarn shop, or Stitch Central is your yarn shop, and probably one I'm forgetting that I feel bad about and I'm sorry, you can go in and love to knit. Yeah, home sewn. You can go in and buy it. And we ship yarn. We sell yarn to local yarn stores all over the country, in Canada and overseas.
And what are you both currently knitting?
So many things. So many things. Finishing nothing, knitting everything all the time. I'm knitting a linen t-shirt that I'm now like looking down the barrel of summer. And I'm now thoroughly unmotivated to finish it because I can tell that I'm not going to finish it before the weather turns. But if I put it away, I'm probably not going to pick it back up in the spring because then I'm going to want to knit something else. And now I'm just thoroughly unmotivated.
Okay, I'm knitting a sweater for my daughter, a sweater for me. I'm finishing a sample for in Germantown, a sweater. I'm actually finishing 2 Germantown samples.
I am knitting a Germantown sweater.
Yeah, she's
Sleeve left.
knitting a Germantown. Yeah. And then we're like, why don't we ever finish anything? Because it's like you spread it out over 18 things. Yeah, we're not.
We're just like you. We're just exactly like all of you.
You can tell. Yeah.
The slide that you had up that had the very skimpy directions on how to adjust the size,
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, they were skimpy.
which looks like it's from the late 50s, early 60s. I just noticed the example it gives is a 40-inch bust that you can adjust to make a 50-inch bust, which seems very generous proportion to use as.
Oh, let me
an
explain this a little better. So this, if the pattern doesn't provide gauge, and if you guys do take a look at the original of the ladies' dressing sacque, it will say like to fit a 40-inch bust, cast on 72 stitches. That's all that it says. So my example here is that doesn't give gauge. It just tells you what yarn to use and how many stitches to cast on. So this is to figure out what the gauge would be. So if it's saying, if you cast on 76 stitches and it's going to give you 20 inches, that means that you have 3.8 stitches per inch. But if I don't want a 40-inch bust, if I want to change the pattern to have a 50-inch bust, once finished circumference, I'm going to take 25 inches, multiply that by 3.8, and then I need to cast on 95 stitches, not 76.
Well, hold on.
Well, the model size that they gave in the ladies' dressing sacque is for a 40-inch bust. And that's the only size they gave was 1. So when we sized the pattern, we size all of our patterns from like basically like a 32 bust up to like 56, 62 inch. This one goes up to 68. So that even if you have a very generous bosom, you can wear this comfortably the way it is supposed to fit with the ease that is required for the fit. Yeah. Talk about what? Ease. Ease. So what ease is basically if the pattern says 40-inch bust and you measure your bust and your bust is 40 inches exactly, you need to knit a bigger size because that's going to skim your body. That's going to be a skin tight sweater, right? So patterns will offer an amount of ease. And usually today, the directions will say this was designed for 4 to 8 inches of positive ease, which means the finished size should be 4 to 8 inches bigger than your actual bust measurement. Or if you want it to be really, really tight, it could say, knit this very skimpy tank top with 2 inches of negative ease, which means I'm a 40, I'm going to knit a 38 so that it's like real tight. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, can I just say, I don't think that these two are equivalent. I think this
No.
image is a vintage image and this is just an example.
Yeah.
So I don't think that they were supposed to be. We need to start moving forward. So do we have any last questions? Have you been trying to ask me a question for a while?
I really was just going to say that I appreciate you telling us the breeds of sheep that you use in Germantown, because I'm a huge fan of the woolen fiber source book. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking at all of them and recognizing them. At the same time, some of those breeds, like the polypay, really are fairly new. So historically, can I ask, would manufacturers of Germantown yarn use a specific breed, or would it be the same situation of territorial wool?
It's probably safe to say that no knitter prior to 2003 ever asked a yarn company what breed the yarn was. No one ever, like Germantown in 1918 was all of those sheep. And then Germantown in 1920 was all of those sheep. And it didn't matter. So she doesn't like that. I'm sorry. Yeah, I think it's just a different approach to manufacturing and a different approach. And even to this day, what Courtney was talking about, the micron count, that matters more in manufacturing than breed.
Just really quickly want to touch on that because it is like so important and super misunderstood. Like I said earlier, micron count, the lower the number, the fewer scales, the softer the yarn. So merino is both a breed of sheep and a classification of micron count of wool from these sheep over here. But maybe not these over here, because these ones, like, their terroir is different. But yeah, like when you're doing large scale manufacturing, you're talking about micron count. So Germantown is a like 23 micron count. So, pardon? So our Scout, which is another yarn that we produce, is a little softer. That's like a 21.5 micron count. Like super, super soft merino would be like a 18, 17, 16, like those really high end, like Ovis, like are like 16 micron, like they're so soft. Yeah, and they just all have different properties. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lynn Landis of Philly Knits. We have a meetup in Philadelphia, and I'd like to speak on behalf of those of us who fake it until we make it, and we don't use patterns at all. So, there's always that option of making your little sample and then using that to plot out your sweaters. So I make lots of sweaters, and they all start out as rectangles. And then I just sew them all together And, it's really simple that way. And if they get too big, then I put them in the washer and then the dryer, and I watch them shrink very carefully.
I always say it'll fit somebody.
Yeah. And
Might not
sometimes,
fit the intended user.
right. And sometimes they end up as bath mats and other things. So I just want to speak up on that. For people who don't want to do the math, there are other ways.
Okay, last question.
I was just wondering about the micron count and pilling.
That's a great question. If the yarn is soft, it will pill more.
All yarn pills.
Wool yarn will pill. That's what it does. That's how it works. It's part of the nature of the yarn. But yes, the softer the yarn, the more it will pill. But also something that is not often talked about, the more loosely you knit it, the more the fibers rub against each other and the faster it will pill. So if you knit your garments on the denser end, right? Like if you're like, I can get gauge with this. It's a little loose, but it's fine. I'm getting 4.5 stitches per inch. It's probably going to pill a little faster. And that is not a quality of the yarn. That is a choice that you have made, my friend.
You guys are lucky we don't have time to talk about superwash.
Can of worms. Okay, we have a few more things we need to do this evening. First of all, we have our own Kate Devlin modeling the sweater. And I did want to follow up to something that Kate mentioned, which is this pattern is so easy to modify. Kate requested 3/4 inch sleeves. And so you just cast on less stitches for the sleeves, and then it's shorter. And I wanted full sleeves for mine, so I cast on the full sleeves for mine. The other thing that is really fun is that the ribbon is completely removable. You can coordinate with your whatever you're wearing. You can also use those scarves that you inherited from somebody a long time ago. They look really great in this. So lots of possibilities with this pattern. So I would like to let me get my notes to make sure I do everything that I'm supposed to wind up. Thank you, Kate. Apologies. We're very excited to have you. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone on Zoom. Thank you so much for coming. Please watch for a follow-up email with the recording in it at some point, but you should get another email from Zoom. And thank you both from Zoom. Round of applause.